TPR.
Episode
Six.
this I think is this episode
Six.
of the TPR Roundup, and we're doing a collaboration episode with Mr. Zirak of Hamnawa and other things. But context here is Hamnawa. I've been pestering him to come on the show for a while. He has things to do, but I kept pulling him on, and finally I have convinced him. And yeah, with the camera on your computer, you even have like a nice, converging line effect, and you're like, I'm sorry, I'm obsessing a bit
You're
over your
appreciating this set.
yeah,
I'm glad.
yeah,
I
like
have found a good set positioning. I consider
yeah,
this improvement from my previous two-face look
no,
with the
they-
window on my
yeah.
side.
Yeah, so we are here to talk about the July release of Hamnawa. Do you want to give a
So-
small blurb about what Hamnawa is? We've talked about it in your main podcast. Check that
Sure.
out. But just so that we can get rolling.
Yeah, I think getting through the system of these monthly releases makes sense because a lot of people get their head around it, and I'm
Yeah,
not very good
yeah.
at explaining it.
Sure.
But given that explaining things is my real job, this is deeply disappointing, but let's not go there. So Hamnawa is a music blog, basically. Like, it's in the form of a newsletter. You sign up on Substack. So you get it in your email. But so I post about songs every few days. So there's usually a few a month. That frequency has been recently changing as life goes back to normal post-COVID. But generally, a few songs a month I get to write about. But I'm always listening to more songs than I am writing about. So the idea is to at least capture all the good music in playlists as well. So there's one main playlist that if you want to just go in and be like, okay, what is new in Pakistani music? There is a Taza Mal playlist, which I'm sure we'll link to the Hamnawa profile in the links underneath. So there's the Taza Mal playlist, which has all the new stuff coming in. So every time new stuff pops up that I think is kind of good, we'll throw it in there, and then we'll kind of keep listening to it. And it's a kind of rotating list. And then I capture the best songs periodically into their own playlist. So if you wanted to go back and say April of 2021, which I think is when I started this, what was the kind of good music? Those are kind of captured. When they're captured, it is a function both of when they are released and when I found them. So sometimes a song shows up on a playlist 3 months after it's released that says nothing about the song, but only says something about me.
Right.
The reason there is a delay is that I'm tracking about like 300 artists on my end, just kind of as they're putting out new stuff. And so just getting through all that material sometimes takes time, but and then sorting through and getting the stuff that is I want to keep track of, stuff that I don't necessarily want to keep track of, but that's where all of this is coming from.
So one question I was wondering before we got into this was the songs that, for example, in the July playlist, those songs do not necessarily have to be in the 30-day-ish period before that playlist comes out. They could be from further back.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, they tend to be like released around that time because that's usually when I tend to find them, but it's possible that they might be older. So Abdul Hannan's song, Bikra, are you familiar with this?
Yeah.
Okay, so that one I didn't find for like 3 months, and I must have been under some rock because clearly the rest of the country found it, but I did not.
Right.
So when it showed up on my playlist, I was like, this is embarrassing, but this song is too good not to include.
Right.
3 months later.
Right.
So I pulled it in. So that sort of thing happens and that was like, it missed my radar because it came so out of the blue that my usual systems did not catch it.
Right. And your systems, then you mentioned that you're tracking artists, 300 artists. So that's then, because I wonder, this is all on Spotify.
Spotify, Instagram, YouTube, because some artists will not put out stuff on Spotify immediately either.
Right.
And some people don't put out stuff on Spotify either. And I think for me, it's also interesting to see how people's audiences get bigger in each of these platforms. So depending on which music scene you're tracking, the platform of choice changes.
But the Hamnawa playlists,
especially between YouTube and Spotify. Hamnawa playlists are on Spotify.
They're all on Spotify. So then to get onto that playlist, you need to have your music on Spotify.
Correct. So I've debated about this a lot, which is like, should I only consider songs that have been released on Spotify or not? And occasionally songs that are released on YouTube, I'll throw on there and then I'll add to the Spotify playlist later when they come out.
Right.
But increasingly, I'm noticing that artists are no longer holding the release on one platform. So what a lot of these hip hop guys used to do, these Karachi hip hop guys especially, is that they would release on YouTube and then they would hold on Spotify. And the Spotify thing happens months later. And then some of the other people were doing this as well. And I think the underlying theory is that if you hold the release on Spotify, that you get more listens on YouTube, get more subscriptions, that net, it has a good effect on your subscriptions. Right. I don't know if that's a proven model, but that is the underlying theory. It seems that is now changing. Like less people seem to be doing that. So it's less of a problem, but it's interesting to me that that's how everybody's thinking.
When you started in April 21, was Spotify still already in Pakistan at that time?
I believe so. Like it was catching on, probably not as big as now, but it was catching on. When I first started writing this was about 2 years ago. Then maybe not so much. Then I thought maybe YouTube. But I think it's slowly caught on quite a bit. It's kind of Spotify's figured stuff out also.
Okay. So then coming to this episode, you sent on 3 songs that will end up on this month's collection of Hamnawa. And the playlist should be, when this comes out, should be out soon or already out?
It should be out soon before or soon after.
Yeah. So Instagram is where you'll find out that the Hamnawa playlist has come out. So 3 songs, 3 very different songs, completely different songs.
I'm interested to get your take on it.
Yeah, how did you... Now, the thing was, I was wondering about, your data gathering methods. Like, are you following playlists? Is somebody else doing, are we like creating meta playlists from other people's playlists? But then you're specifically following artists. I didn't know there were 300 artists to follow. And then I don't know which of these artists. Rozeo is one of the people. It would make sense that you're following Rozeo. Were you following the other 2 as well? How did those songs come to you?
So let's talk about the first one, is Tamasha, which is DJ Khalifa and superdupersultan. So DJ Khalifa I was not following.
Is that song in Balochi?
I believe so.
Okay. I also believe so.
I can't be 100% sure.
Exactly same. Yeah.
So that's why the song is so interesting to me. So as far as I can take, DJ Khalifa is the solo stage name for one of the members of the Liari Underground group. So Liari Underground I was following, but they are not performing as a group as much anymore. And so their individual members are doing more things. So Asif Ali does his things with the Dark Street Records, is this like a record label on YouTube that puts out tons of hip hop from this like their little Karachi scene. So DJ Khalifa is one of them, but as a solo form has very little following, which is very interesting. So they were not able to translate that kind of that LUG following into their kind of individual personas. I'm not quite sure why. So I wasn't following him because I didn't even know his solo act existed. What I was following was superdupersultan. So superdupersultan is, are you familiar with him?
No.
He is a young producer from this Karachi like Stunners universe. So I have I have to map all of these like hip hop guys into my own little bubble, right?
Of course.
I think there are 2 hip hop scenes in Pakistan. Or 2 hip hop genres in Pakistan. There's a lyrical rap scene, which is what these like Stunners guys are doing, and all of the people around them.
Almost
and they have some of these songs that you can hum. Almost, it is poetry, right? So if you take away all of their big songs, everybody around them is making songs that are like very simple beats usually. They often start with like pre-made beats that they are getting from somewhere else and then putting poetry on top. And the songs are not meant to be like hummable. You listen to them a couple times, you talk about the words. And if you look at all the reaction videos from the scene, they're always about the words. They're never about the beat as much. But it's almost just it's as if the music is there to help you like capture the words once.
Exactly.
And you need to think of them as like poems that are being released in musical form. So they are not listened to in kind of the same musical fashion. Some of the big songs that have hooks become popular. So Guman, the Young Stunner song, like Don't Mind, all of their big songs have these like musical hooks, which brings you in as artists, and then you stick for the lyrical stuff. So that is that lyrical hip hop scene, of which the biggest guys are these the 2 Talhas, Talha Anjum or Talha Yunus. But they have become kind of stars of that scene, and there is this array of stars underneath them that they have kind of helped foster. from what I
Right.
can tell from the outside. So I call that universe the Stunners universe.
The Stunners universe.
So
yeah.
Stunners universe में दो producer हैं. Okay?
Right.
So there's Joke, who is the big ticket
Joke,
item. So
yeah.
if Joke is producing any new rapper song, that is like, that guy has made it.
Yeah. I've seen Joke a lot.
But Joke obviously. So Joke is very popular. So Joke is like the third stunner almost, right?
Almost,
so if the third stunner is on your song, that's, Joke is like what George Martin was to the Beatles, Joke is to the Stunners.
Right.
So that's the way of framing this. And so now if, Joke goes and produces some other unknown artist, then you are going to be listening to them. Same way that like Tala Yunus or Tala Anjum will show up on songs with these like unknown people and suddenly bring them up. And they have done that so often and have such huge output that is how they create this universe around them.
Yeah.
Actually, then there is this other young producer called superdupersultan, who is also from that universe and then works with the lesser known guys. And he is more of the kind of pop rap genre. And so pop rap genre is, I said lyrical rap was one and pop rap is the other. So pop rap is where the artist is or the vocalist is ostensibly rapping, but the song on its own is meant to not be consumed as a poem, but to be consumed as a song that you can hum. So right. So like the stuff that Manu does often, I think, is pop rap.
Yeah. Lots of musicality to it.
So that is lots of musicality. You're like thinking of it as a song. Like he is not kind of moving the kind of melodically. His pitch is not changing drastically. So which is why you can think of it as kind of rap. Like he's delivering the voice rhythmically, but there is still like a strong melody in the underlying music as well as the stuff that he is saying. Yeah. So Super Duper Sultan is the kind of pop rap producer of the Stunners universe.
Right.
If this lens makes sense.
Right.
As far as I know, very young, does lots of really interesting stuff. And so he is on my radar because he does very interesting things. And so when he puts out a song with DJ Khalifa, then it shows up in my net. And so this song, as far as I can tell, is Baluchi. And what I find very interesting about it is I don't understand a word of what he's saying. And I can't figure out any translation anywhere. But it is still somewhat, you can feel a kind of local familiarity or attachment to it. And so I find this particularly striking because I never got into hip hop especially in Western hip hop. Like for me, the only way I got into hip hop was South Asian hip hop. So when I write about hip hop, I write about it from like, oh my God, what is happening? Situation,
Right.
Where did this come? So I have to go back and study. So I know.
Yeah, you're not reaching back to like early 90s and LL Cool J to NWA, and then you're not making those sort of historic.
I don't know it.
Allegories.
I don't know it that well, so I have to go through other people to help me figure it out.
Sure.
Like rock, I can understand.
Of
right?
course.
So like the rock movement, I can see like roughly, I can figure out what influences they're looking at.
Yeah.
But hip hop, I know less about. So I have to start here and then go backwards. So it's interesting for me. But even with like local South Asian, non-Hindi Urdu rap or non-Punjabi rap, which is a language I would understand, there is still some semblance of connection to it. And I don't know whether it's the melodies that they choose or just the kind of audio fabric of the language.
Right.
But there seems to be a connection for me, which is why I find it interesting. Right. I want to get your opinion on this, whether you feel the same way.
No, I really found this song quite appealing. Like, of the three, even though I like Rozeo a lot, Sidhu Moosewala, not really familiar with his story. The first time I really found out about him was with his untimely death and the big reaction on both sides of the border. But this song was the most striking to me. You only sent them to me yesterday, so I heard them the most times of all the three. And I felt I haven't listened to a lot of LUG. I knew them from way back, since they've been around for a long time. But I feel that I recognized it also, this curious connection, more as being a Balochi song because of Kannayari and Eva B. That's what I immediately thought of, which made me think, oh, this is Balochi. But the song itself, I thought was very polished, and I didn't understand a word again, but that wasn't a hindrance or a huge impediment to my enjoying the song.
It's catchy, like you can bop to it. I think that polish comes from
Super Duper, right.
Sometimes they're referred to as Sultan. I don't know what the short form of his name is because you can't say that many syllables so quickly.
SDS.
But I think that's where that polish comes from. So for me, it's really interesting. Like the following the producers is almost more interesting than following the rappers sometimes, especially if you're interested in the kind of musicality of it. So really great song, very catchy. And it's I think following like Super Duper's work is like very is a good way to get into this, especially if you haven't listened to a lot of hip hop and like lyrical hip hop doesn't make sense to you. Starting there and then going places is a good place to be.
Okay. Sidhu Moosewala. Why do you think his death and may had such an impact on Pakistan that now we're hearing music made about him? This guy who was on the he's Indian. There's like everyone talks about the border and the other side and this side. It's like in Karachi there's a bridge in Clifton, and you're either this side of the bridge or that side of the bridge. Why is this important?
So the song, let me give an introduction of the song. The song is by this Gujarati rapper, Pakistani Gujarati rapper called Khaki. And so he has this song called, is a tribute to Sidhu Moosewala. It's very emotional, like it's almost emotional enough that it's hard to listen to it a number of times and then not have to, it feels inappropriate to pop. Like that's how emotional it is, right? So you can't listen to it that often. So no. I had followed a couple of Kaki's other songs, and then so I think I included one of his in the previous playlist. But then this one struck me not purely because of his sort of musicality. The writing is really good. It's very fluid writing. It's almost a kind of folk melody on top of a hip hop beat. Like he's rapping, but it could be, you could think of it as a Bhangra song, right? Which I find interesting primarily because if you talk to Fakhr Alam about the history of, it's a detour, about how rap shows up to Pakistan, because he is like ostensibly early 90s kind of Bhangra rap becomes the first song. So I said, what came first, Bhangra or rap? He said the rap came first. And if you look at it, there was no Bhangra music before Bhangra rap. And I was like, this is a crazy occurrence.
Is this true,
a theory that, kind of Abrar showed up after Bhangra rap. So if you look at it in terms of, so Fakhr Alam's theory to me was that Bhangra music also sources from rap music in a sense. At least in genealogy.
Is this like, Pakistani Bhangra music? Because there's also like a UK
Pakistani Bhangra music.
Okay.
UK Bhangra music. I meant Pakistani Bhangra music in terms of kind of its format. And I don't know if it draws ostensibly from hip hop, but if there is this connection, I don't know. But anyway, this is one of those songs where you can see that those histories can be very intermingled.
Right.
Because the way that he is delivering the kind of Punjabi folk melody in a rap format in a slightly different setting could become nearly Bhangra almost.
Sure.
Which I think is, so that kind of musically is interesting. The reason it is interesting to me topically is that for a lot of people that are not following hip hop, we would not have known much about Sidhu Moosewala, just as you said. We would not have been listening to his music had it not been for all these tributes that we are now seeing around us. I had this thread on my Twitter just capturing like all of these like Sidhu Moosewala tributes across Pakistan. Trucko pe paint ho rahe hain. Election poster pe Sidhu Moosewala ki shakal lagi hai, which I think just to pause and just say ki election poster pe Pakistani politician, ek Indian politician ki tasveer laga raha hai. It is just mind-boggling in this day and age that this even occurred. And the only reason it happens is because of Punjabi hip-hop. And so for me, the interesting thing here is one, that he has such an influence, and how he has such an influence is kind of hard for me to track. But what is clear, if you listen to any of this hip hop, especially if you listen to this Sunners universe or this Karachi hip hop scene, is that the link to Bombay's hip hop scene is huge, very large. So there is a ton of cross-border interaction. Right? अब हम जब सोचते हैं कि भाई India Pakistan artistic collaboration, तो बस ज़हन में वही आता है कि Junoon went over, then Strings went over, then all these Bollywood songs have these Pakistani artists, and it's like big ticket item, bade concert ho rahe hain. And all that died, and we were like, acha, that collaboration ended. And I think that we are now at a point where we can make the argument that this hip hop scene is a stronger collaborative artistic scene than that one ever was, because that one was just a few big ticket items, right? Atif Aslam is still singing Bollywood songs. Atif is the kind of star of that situation, and Atif and Rahat are the stars of that situation. But if we look at it in terms of renewed, continued influence type collaboration, like how many people are you influencing on the other side of the border? How many of them are listening to you, commenting back in a public fashion? Like ye jo Jyoti YouTube pe jo reaction videos karte hain, these like two Indian girls that react to lots of Pakistani songs. Right? They are huge. And they're not the only Indian folks that respond to Pakistani songs.
I saw this like reaction explosion, especially after Cook Studio, where so many Indian people were reviewing Pakistani Cook Studio. Big fans, had prior knowledge of most of the artists. So they had like that contextual awareness also, that this is something that's new, or this is like a continuation of like past excellence or whatever. And just to fit in another thing, I think Gully Boy was perhaps just as important in
Yes.
Karachi as Bombay, I feel, because
Right.
everyone knows everything about that movie. In Karachi, they feel like this strong, direct relationship to it.
And you hear references to Gully Boy a
All
lot
the
also.
time, all the
So
this whole Irfan Junaid
yeah,
universe, which is yours, like your Stunners universe. The Irfan Junaid universe is constantly dropping Gully Boy and similar, gang movie type references. But Gully Boy is big.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I find that the amount of references that are happening, even collaborations that are happening, like producers or rappers from two ends will like work together to put out a song. The amount of that occurs in the hip hop universe, I don't think exists in any other artistic setting in Pakistan that I can think of, especially not music, but probably even aside of that. And I think the reason that happens is because it happens on YouTube and Instagram.
Yes.
That it goes beyond these like big institutions. You don't need like a government approval, but ho raha hai, kya karega?
Right.
Who can stop you?
Right.
And it is so strong. And now, from Sidhu Moosewala's passing, it has become clear that it is so pervasive that even the big folks have to just kind of give way to it. Like I think like you were seeing all of these hip hop artists show up on Coke Studio and elsewhere. And if it didn't happen now, then I had a feeling that I think these big shows would have faced irrelevance from one big chunk of the market.
Yeah.
Because these hip hop folks didn't come through like, oh, kabhi ye Coke Studio mein the to aa gaye, ek do gaane hue na, kabhi token gaane Coke Studio mein do aaye hain. But it's not like let's track Ali Sethi, for example. Like, not to take anything from Ali Sethi or kind of rock bands, but they had platforms where like they showed up on, might have shown up on TV, might have shown up on Coke, but right. So platforms had a way of kind of pulling up new artists, or even accepting ways that things were accepting artists that were on the rise. But for these hip hop folks, it didn't happen until they were way bigger than anyone ever expected.
Yeah.
Like, so if these guys put out an audio track, it has like 1 million listens. Video ke baghair, that's how big they are, and like nobody knows anything. And they have tons of small artists that you would never have heard of that have really tiny followings. And whenever I write about them on the Hamnawa page, which is not really a hip hop audience, people will be like, "I'm sorry, is this turning into a hip hop page? This seems like this music is kind of not super mature. Why are you listening to this?" The reason I'm listening to this is not because it's not like a musically mature scene that is kind of pushing the boundaries of the musicality. It's because it is capturing such eyeballs that it is clear that it is saying something about a large part of the audience that has never felt represented in the music scene before. And for me, I think that is like usually young boys from urban centers.
Of course.
Like there's not a lot of women in hip hop, but I think like young boys in urban centers feel represented by this music. And they are, and I think that same feeling is shared across the border, such that you can feel represented in music from across the border, and artists can appeal to people from across the border as well, which I think is a really strong kind of unbreakable connection given the number of people involved and how pervasive it is. And so I think I put this song in there as an acknowledgement of how pervasive and complex this scene is. And how it's just sort of worth watching. Like, even if you're not interested in this music, to just go listen to like the big stuff to really realize how much is happening and how diverse the industry is. Because I think people are always like, मैंने हमने जब लिखना शुरू किया था, बोला इतने नए गाने निकल भी रहे हैं कि तुम हर हफ्ते कुछ लिख सकते हो. Which
that's
is just,
what I was wondering. Yeah.
The answer is yes.
Okay. Finally, the Rozeo song. But before we get there, so people have been asking you about the frequency of hip hop appearing in Hamnawa playlist, because that's something I've noticed. There's a lot of hip hop, so people have been noticing.
It's I think also because a lot of people saw me getting into it kind of through Hamnawa as well. Like I wasn't into it before. Like I didn't know much about the scene. When I started writing Hamnawa, I was writing about as much new music as I am now. So now it is almost primarily new music. And so before I was writing about some old songs, some new songs, but my listening has expanded quite a bit. And if you're listening to new Pakistani music and not listening to hip hop, then you're missing out on a bunch. So for me, there are times when I'm listening to a lot more and listening to a lot less. You can see what I'm listening to in the playlist as well. And so it's very opinionated. in terms of its editorializing. So I never claim for it to be like, oh, best Pakistani music.
Sure,
because somebody
sure.
else may
Of
make a
course.
different list, right?
Of course.
So it's just the sort of stuff that I really like listening to. But I try to capture the big scenes that are occurring at one time. And I think this is a big enough scene, and so much bigger than a lot of the kind of English speaking scenes across the country that it makes sense to at least acknowledge it. And you'll find some really good stuff that appeals to really mainstream audiences as well.
Yeah. Okay. Quickly then, in the interest of time, Rozeo, very established. I think one of my favorite Lahori rap wordsmiths. There's this song that he did for the Pepsi thing with him. There's a Heather. I think there's a I'm a Big is also there, and it's like a like a Pepsi song, and it's nice and fun and bubbly or whatever. But he's the sort of guy that who'll show up in something like that, and I'll be like, bro, Rozeo, like, kya kaam kiya boy ne? That sort of vibe I get. Why is this song in this month's playlist?
So I think Rozeo has like incredible range.
Yes.
In terms of
Yes.
tonality. Like he has this like very serious, like very punchy rap, but then he can get ridiculously silly.
Yes.
Right? And this is one of his like ridiculous. It's hard to listen to it without smiling a little bit. Especially if you look at the video as well.
There's a video.
It is. Yeah, and it is unabashedly silly. The video includes one other Instagram star, and you do follow the handle Be Like Hamza.
Of course, Be Like Hamza is a common, often collaborator with Rozeo.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So Be Like Hamza is in this video. So basically, the video is just them also being unabashedly silly.
Right.
And the reason I have it in there is because it's just fun. And for me, it's also the way I pick these songs was, as you can now tell, because I have stories to tell about them that are beyond just the individual song. And I think so. This entire video and this entire song is packaged as a way of bringing one other Instagram star to come do silly things with Rozeo, right? And I find that especially for this Lahore pop scene, but in some sense for the larger music scene, Instagram is now the site that you follow these artists.
Okay.
Right? It is the site of their. By site, I don't just mean website. I mean like the place of where this interaction is happening.
Versus
like the way
YouTube?
that you follow these artists versus YouTube, because YouTube is you only see the formalized versions of it, right? You'll see the music video. But if you want to learn about the artists, know them personally, begin to follow them, like begin to create a fan following. The fan following is not built from just listening to polished songs. The fan following is built by some personal interaction that occurs between the artists and between the listeners. And so I think Ali Sethi's Instagram presence during COVID is the perfect example of this.
Right.
So if you take all of this previous generation of artists, right, that showed up in the early 2000s, and then you look at Ali Sethi decided, okay, forget the stages, forget everything else. I'm going to put a phone up against a wall, and I'm going to have my little keyboard, and I'll just hang out for an hour. And people went nuts. Right? And then occasionally, random artists would show up. Occasionally, he would do a rendition of a song that you can't capture anywhere except for that Instagram. And in a way, it's really frustrating because you're like, this format does not lend itself to music being heard multiple times. Why are people engaging here? But it has a crazy following because people are on Instagram, and it allows this sort of rawness to occur that connected a lot of people to Ali Sethi. And if you look at this year's Coke Studio, Shea Gill's appearance, and in a way, a lot of the other artists that showed up, I find that more than any other season, this season was constructed on Instagram.
Makes sense.
Where even I think Zulfi was interacting with people, being like, "Acha, who are you listening to? What brings in?" And so Instagram becomes the place where you go suss out an artist and figure it out. And not only are the musicians doing it, but audiences are doing it as well. And in a way, I think what you are following is not just the music that the artists put out, but also their friendships. And you are following a kind of cabal of stars in this sort of Instagram reality show. And so they are building their personality, they're creating a persona, they're making whatever jokes they want to make. And so I think this song helps you kind of understand that, which is that why is this random Instagram comedian that we have no idea about a recurring presence in this guy's music videos? And if you think back to 10, 15 years ago, this is extremely strange. And a lot of the countries will be like, कौन है बंदा हम जानते भी नहीं है हमें इसका नाम भी नहीं पता पूरा हम उसको Be Like Hamza बोलते हैं इसके नाम में Be Like क्यों आ रहा है and just when people are known by their Instagram handles, and so it's becoming this interesting little world that you have to go in. And the hip hop world is again like that, which is that you have to find an entryway into the world, and then you begin to see that underneath there is a lot of
Yeah.
stories happening. And that's
Yeah.
the reason the hip hop world is interesting, because once you get in, you realize, oh, this guy just said, like, posted something on Instagram that is a reference to what this other guy
Yes.
said on Instagram 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
And then you need some reaction page to put them all together to make sense to us uncles who have been too far away from all of this.
It's a whole ecosphere, like it's a whole self-contained, environment where you have to be in it
Right.
full time to connect all the dots.
Right. And then you just need like some kind of interlocutor, every now and then. And this song is good because it sort of, on its own, is catchy enough that it'll pull you in.
Yeah.
And then it'll help you get into the scene. I think so. The system is very interesting, which is that artists make one catchy song. The catchy song pulls you into their little world. Then you, again, like we said when we were last talking, which is that you come for the content and then you stay for the people.
Yeah.
So I think the successful artists here have to create this, also be interesting people online for other people to kind of catch on to, and then to be popular enough across all the platforms for people to continue following them and to continue kind of share their work. So that's why this one's in there. But primarily because it's silly and makes me laugh.
Amazing. Okay, so when you've had all this discussion, if people want to find out more Hamnawa stuff, they follow your Instagram, obviously, because that's where you need to be. We've established. There are other like ideas in my mind. I've talked to content creators a lot. I've talked to now some startup people in India and Pakistan. There seems to be, I guess, because we're like historically poor nations, countries where there's always like a mad fight over facilities and oppressed by those in power. There's like this through line across art, culture, industry where people are like, I want to do something for the people, whether it's like solve a problem or just bring awareness to the problem. In the hip hop scene, I think there's a lot of, especially in the Karachi and Mumbai, Bombay hip hop scenes, there's a lot of bring awareness to the problem vibes, which I think is also there in the Liari underground and by extension Baluchi scene, and then in the Punjab scene in India. So I'm just thinking of like future topics because we're out of time. Anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I think it'd be good to get some feedback where people are listening to what songs they like, what songs they don't. That really helps me select things. So I enjoy talking about these songs, and I hope people can find playlists.
Go follow Hamnawa. It's all tagged everywhere. And follow his Xerox Spotify. We did an episode with him. Check that out. Do all the hard work. Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. Bye.